Hey guys, I'm Cher Martinetti, contributing editor at Blastr.com, and this is our second Fangirls Hangout. Tonight I'm joined by managing editor of Black Girl Nerds, which I just said badly, Jamie Broadnecks, right?
Yes, you said it perfectly.
Yay! Thank you for joining me for this. This is a really, I think, really timely and important conversation because of obviously the Oscars this weekend and everything that's been going on for the past almost 2 months now with the Oscars So White hashtag, and a lot of stuff has seemed to spawn off that. So yeah. I know just myself being a woman, how I feel about representation of women in media and films and genre, but I really want to talk to somebody that isn't a white woman about what it's like to be a woman of color, a woman of ethnicity, and the representation in media and all that great stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. Where do we begin?
We're going to start with the Oscars. So the Oscars So White hashtag, it seemed to, in a very short period of time, make a huge impact. The Academy actually came out with that announcement that they're going to be changing a lot of their standards or whatnot when it comes to their voting and what it's going to take to actually be on the Academy, because now they're going to change, I guess, the qualifications or whatnot. But aside from that, I mean, there's an astonishingly low number of people of color that are being represented in film, period, whether it's behind the camera or in front of the camera.
Right.
It's not there. So can you just talk to me a little bit about that as a black woman and a woman that's involved in media?
Right.
Tell me how that impacts and how that affects you.
I mean, it affects me in a pretty profound way because it's very frustrating as someone who actually went to film school and tried to go in the direction of working in the film industry and have the experience of just dealing with gatekeepers and dealing with people that was trying to push you out. So I have firsthand experience of what it's like being in the film industry, and I definitely understand where people are coming from when we're having these conversations about Oscars So White. It's very frustrating that in 2016 that we are still having this conversation. It's even more frustrating that it's blatantly, monolithic, and there's just this huge hegemony of whiteness that we're seeing on the screen and being represented as far as the Oscar nominees and contenders. So it's a conversation that's moved a little bit past the Academy, and I feel like it's sort of the elephant in the room that nobody's ever really talked about, and finally this hashtag has sounded off the opportunities for so many marginalized voices, because it's not just about women of color, but it's also the LGBT community and, people that have disabilities and indigenous people, and they have a voice as well in this Oscar So White conversation. So yeah, I think that there's a lot to be said about what's happening with that, and again, it's very frustrating as a woman of color that we continue to just go in circles about what do we need to do about diversity, what can we do to make things better, and people of color are sounding off about it, but I feel like sometimes it's just falling on deaf ears. So the hashtag movement has made some systemic changes. There have been some membership changes in the Academy, which is absolutely great, and I feel like I'm a little bit more optimistic. I feel like we are living in an age now where social media and having the ability to create your own content via blogging, via podcasting, what have you, is giving a lot of people with marginalized voices opportunities to put their stuff out there. So, I mean, it's frustrating in a lot of ways, but you definitely got to see where the silver lining is in some areas.
So I want to read some stats to you. You know how the women in the San Diego University has their study where they do the whole breakdown of women in television and film.
Mm-hmm.
The study came out at the end of the year last year, and some of the stats that I saw were, I mean, I highlighted some of them in a piece I just wrote last week for Fangirls about the importance of the jobs of female characters in films, because the way women are being represented, especially in genre films, it matters what they do for work, because there's such a shockingly low number of women in film that are being shown, A, having a job, B, being at work, or see where their goal as a character is job-based. Most of the time, their goal as a character is based on their personal life and their relationships, whereas with men, it's not the same. So it was saying how for women, 4%, so 76% of all female characters were white. Meanwhile, women made up less than 40% of all roles in film. 4% were black. No, 13% were black, 4% were Latina, 3% were Asian, and 2% were otherworldly. I mean, that's astonishing. And it just doesn't represent, I feel like, the world that we live in. And I feel like when we're talking about, especially genre and sci-fi, which these are two mediums that anything can happen. Like, you can make anything. There's aliens and robots and stuff, so it's like these are two genres that should be pushing the imagination and pushing the envelope even further. How do you feel with the representation that's happening in sci-fi and genre and fantasy?
I mean, I feel like there should be more of us. I mean, this is a reimagined world. This is fiction, so it's not like we are accurately trying to depict someone who is white and we're telling their story. So anybody could play the role. And the fact that, again, people of color are not being depicted in these roles that are just fictional, reimagined futures tells a lot of people what white people think of our future. But, you know, I think that we just really need to be real with what's happening and be real with the fact that there are folks in Hollywood that continue to marginalize us, and the gatekeeping is just so real, and not only when it comes to just people of color, but also women in the industry. And we need to just find ways to move forward to that. And I don't know quite how to do that. Like, if I had an idea for it, I certainly would put it out there and make those changes happen. But I like to support independent content creators, and that's what I do with my platform. And that's sort of my mission, is to give them some amplification, give them some notoriety, whether it's running a press release about their film, whether it's inviting them as a guest to their podcast, to my podcast. Doing those kinds of things and giving them publicity when other film critics and other film press junkets don't really do that. And they play a role in this whole Oscar so white conversation. It's not just about the Academy, it's about the folks that are actually covering the films that are being campaigned for these nominations.
So speaking of films and speaking of representation, you've heard about the Duvernay Test that has been like this, the new thing that came out and started. I always say Bechdel test wrong, so I was trying not to say it. But of the movies that have come out, let's say in the past year or so, do you think any of them, specifically genre and sci-fi, of course, because that's what we talk about, do you think any of them would pass the Duvernay Test?
Oh gosh, I nothing comes to mind right now in the sci-fi genre. It's very male. You know, I cannot think of one right off the top of my head, which is unfortunate, and it speaks to what this whole problem is, and this having this conversation about lack of diversity. So, you know, I'm seeing it reimagined through other genres, not necessarily sci-fi. So I'm seeing it depicted in supernatural shows like Sleepy Hollow, and probably I would even be safe to say like sci-fi shows such as Minority Report, which is unfortunately no longer on the air. But so television seems to be a little bit ahead of the pack than film. But those shows kind of come to mind at the top of my head, and then of course like drama shows like Scandal and How to Get Away with Murder, and pretty much everything under the Shondaland umbrella is definitely making waves in that capacity.
So you've also heard of there's the Jane Test. Did you hear about that?
No, I don't.
The Jane Test basically got sprung off of, you know, the Twitter handle FemScript Intros. Did you see this at all?
No.
Okay, so FemScript Intros, which you definitely should check out. It's this Hollywood producer, he's, no one honestly that I've ever heard of before. And excuse the noise in the background. One of my dogs is making.
I was like, is that a dog?
So sorry about that, guys. But he started posting actual introductions that are in scripts for women characters, female leads, and they're incredibly like misogynistic and condescending, and they're all basically based on her looks.
Oh,
so
wow.
We're doing a Jane test now, so that you could see as a creator if your script passed the Jane test, which basically is not introducing the character in a way that like it's only putting her weight and her substance and her looks, and it's actually making her a character of worth and having substance and something to do. So that's, I mean, it's great that that happened and it's got all this attention. You had a lot of Hollywood, bigger Hollywood names retweeting and co-signing that this definitely happens. They've seen it, and going back looking at their earlier scripts, they realized that they were even a little guilty of that.
The dog agrees with you.
But yeah, so one of the things though that was a little disheartening with that is that apparently like women have been talking about this for a while, like, and the Mary Sue actually pointed this out, that there's been bloggers and whatnot that have been posting how like there's these really sexist casting calls and the kind of like things that they're saying and the descriptions of what they want for characters in films and in shows in Hollywood. So I just want to kind of get like what your feeling was a little bit on that, with not just as a woman of color. So sorry about this, but
the dog has more opinions about this.
He's so mad right now. It's an issue.
I mean, I haven't heard much about what was going on with this.
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know if it's going to change anything. I mean, it would be great if it did. But we have like a whole bunch of films that are coming out. We have Wonder Woman is coming up. Captain Marvel is supposedly going to be coming out in the next like year or so. And it seems like Marvel and DC and a lot of these big properties and studios are finally starting to do something. I mean, we have, the first Black Super is going to be on the big screen in Civil War.
Right.
So do you think it's enough? And how hopeful are you for the way we're going to see, people of color, women, LGBT community? How hopeful are you for how we're going to see them represented in these films?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Is it enough? I would be so bold to say no, it's not enough. I mean, I really love the fact that we're going to get a Black Panther movie. We're also going to get a Cyborg movie. He's a Black superhero in the DC world. And we're going to see Luke Cage in the Netflix series. We're going to get an Iron Fist, which I don't think he's going to be Asian Iron Fist, even though I wanted that to happen. But that's happening. And then Jessica Jones series came out. So the diversity is definitely happening. But I think we should be seeing a lot more of it. And Marvel and DC, and both on the publishing side as well as the entertainment side, also has a major diversity problem. And it wasn't until a lot of us, in the nerd Twitterverse started speaking out about how the problem with diversity was happening with Marvel and DC that we started to see a little bit of shifting happening, which is great because I love the fact that the Black Panther comic right now is being written by Ta-Nehisi Coates, and that there's a Luke Cage and Iron Fist comic that's being written by David Walker and Sanford Green, and Afua Richardson, Black female artist, is doing Marvel comics. So it's good to see that there are us out there that's doing the work. But to just like name off a few names compared to the hundreds of staffers and actors and filmmakers that have been making these movies and these products for so long is, to me, not diversity. I just had a conversation recently. I had a podcast interview with Arjun Gupta, who plays on the show The Magicians, and he's of South Asian descent. And we were talking about diversity, and he brought up a very good point about the fact that there's a difference between diversity and tokenism. And tokenism is when there's only, just one person of color and people think, okay, it's diverse.
Like, oh, I have a black friend, I'm not racist. Like that. it's saying it without saying it. Yeah.
Exactly. And and Ava DuVernay's had this same conversation about that. And I think that, we need to really focus on the fact that just because you have one or two people of color, one or two genderqueer people in the room, that it's not necessarily diversity. We need to really reflect what the world is around us. I think of it this way. If I'm in a New York City train station, all of the people that's inside of that car with me, those are the kinds of people that I want to see on my TV set. Those are the folks that I want to see in, the movies that I watch, because that is the real world. I don't have a sea filled with white faces around me. Right. And of course there are subsets of various cities where you see that, but in the grand scheme of things, that's really not what the real world represents. So we just have to see ourselves reflected in that and understand those differences, those stark differences between what diversity is and what tokenism is.
I think, too, playing off what you just said, I mean, we both live in New York City, and Marvel now having, Jessica Jones and Luke Cage and Daredevil are all based out of New York City. I mean, technically, so is Iron Man, so is Captain America. Right. So it's like Marvel really needs to step up with this, and it's great that they have a blind superhero. It's great that that show is taken off. That's amazing, and it's great that they're going to have, Luke Cage is going to have his own series. So they're doing the right thing. I think when it comes to TV, those Netflix shows are definitely a step up, and I think maybe because it's the adult content, they're able to push a little more boundaries. But I also feel like one of the things we should talk about is that, Thor is going to be coming up soon. I think, he only has a few movies left, right, in his contract. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we all know in the comics there's other Thors. There's a female Thor.
Right.
Yes. A horse, that's Thor, so then there's a whole conversation now where it's like, a lot of people would love to see that the next Thor is a woman. Or see where these female characters, or that are taking the helm, the new Spider-Man is a person of color. Right. So there's been a lot of pushback on that. And a lot of people are saying how, they should just have their own superheroes because that's not who that character is. Peter Parker was white, but the mantle has changed hands. Yeah. So what do you feel about that? I mean, I know how I feel as a woman. I feel like, you're being a baby, basically. And I don't have any time for that whole, oh my God, my childhood's ruined argument, because it's like, dude, your childhood didn't go anywhere. But how do you feel about, the whole, when people start saying stuff like, they should have their own heroes, which we should. There should be, women, there should be people of color, there should be Asian, there should be LGBT. Everyone should have their own heroes, but I don't know that I don't feel right with saying that that's a valid argument when it comes to, there shouldn't be a female Thor, there shouldn't be a She-Hulk.
Yeah. I've been on both sides of this. So I was at one point thinking, well, what difference does it make? We should just have people that are being represented in all forms. So we should have a female Thor. We should have a black Spider-Man. We should have a black Captain America. What's wrong with that? This is diversity. This is what we want. But then on the other hand, and I engage and talk with and work with a lot of comic book creators and a lot of comic book creators of color who are very firm in their stance that we do need to create comic book characters of their own origin and have their own stories. Because what happens is in these reimagined stories and these reboots, these characters become of a certain race or a certain gender for a few years, and then it's back to the white male character again. Thor is going to go back to being Thor. Captain America is going to go back, to being Captain America, to being Steve Rogers, and then what's going to happen? So I totally get it from that side of it, but then I would love to see a female Thor movie. I think that would be awesome. So I think we could do both. I don't think that there's anything wrong with gender, gender swapping, race bending. I think that that's great, but I also do think that we should have original characters that hold their own. I mean, Blade is a great character in the Marvel Universe, and he kicked off the Marvel films, arguably, like, people try to say, oh, it was Iron Man. No, it was Blade that did that. So we need to have more films like Blade and original characters and allow them to have their own established universes, so that way they can carry their own, properties and their own films and comics and so on and so forth. So I agree with both sides when it comes to that.
What do you feel is whether it's a comic book, a TV show, a movie, that gets diversity right, and within genre, sci-fi or fantasy, that really, I mean, I know for me personally, I always bring up Battlestar Galactica, because I think that that's really one of the few TV shows that it did have much more inclusion than a lot of shows had before, and even since. I mean, it was very sex positive. You saw people from various backgrounds, various sexualities on the show. Star Trek has always been like ahead of the fold, like decades ahead of everybody else. But what are some recent properties that you feel that you're optimistic about, or you're hopeful about?
So everything under Shondaland, I'm 100%,
But genre-wise.
What's that?
Genre-wise, because Shondaland, unless she starts writing, a superhero TV show.
Oh yeah. So with the genres like sci-fi and all of that stuff, I think shows like The Expanse, which I have not gotten into yet, but I heard that there's a lot of great. Yeah, I heard there's a lot great diversity going on there. I think that there are great shows like. Unfortunately, I'm thinking of the canceled stuff because I haven't been up on my genre shows lately. Oh yeah, I heard Dark Matter is very good. The Killjoys has a lot of diversity. The shows that I was watching that are canceled now, Minority Report and Almost Human, was some really great shows for genre TV. I just think there needs to be more. There's just not really enough that show.
Comic books or movies.
Yeah, and as far as movies go, I honestly cannot think of anything off of the top of my head that I've seen recently, because Marvel is just like Oscar's so white, Marvel's so white. I think that's going to be like the waiting game. So the films that I mentioned before, that's going to be on Netflix, the TV shows, I should say, on Netflix, that's where we're going to see a lot more of it unfold. We're going to have to wait till 2018 for Black Panther, but that's when we'll see it, and also we have to wait later on for Captain Marvel. But, it's slowly coming into the fold, but right now there's just not a lot that I'm seeing, and certainly I obviously can't think of any off the top of my head.
So as a fan, I mean, I know for myself, when I was younger and I was a kid, like I always talk about how Princess Leia was like my first idol, and Wonder Woman, because the TV show is on TV when I was little. Yeah. And one of the things that drew me to both those characters, especially Princess Leia, was because she was a female surrounded by guys. She had dark hair. Wonder Woman was this strong girl with dark hair, and I wasn't really seeing a lot of that on TV. So for me to see that and growing up in a house full of boys, it felt like, oh, like there's females that somehow, something about me I'm feeling like I relate to. As a young black girl, and even as a black woman, like, how does that make you feel that you can't even name a movie or a TV show that's on TV right now that you're watching? How do you think that affects young black audiences?
That's why we say constantly, it's not a buzz phrase, it's not something that's trendy to say, but it's important to us. Representation matters. If you don't see yourself reflected in media, you don't feel any value. You don't feel like you matter, and that's why it is so important for us to be able to walk into a comic book store and see images of ourselves. White guys have confidence. Even the most mediocre of white guys have confidence, because they can walk into any comic book shop across the country and see tons of images of superheroes that look exactly like them. As a black woman, I can't
what they wish they looked like.
Right. They wish they looked like those characters. But I don't get to see that. Occasionally, I'll see one, but then her comic gets canceled, like Storm. Storm had a very short run, and that was it. And there's other comics that are out now that are great, like I'm reading Bitch Planet, that's got a lot of women of color in it, and reimagined stories like Saga that's just got all types of diversity happening in it, which is great to read and to be a part of, but it's just few and far between. Like, you can only count, on one hand how many there are. There's just not enough. And there's certainly a lot of independent comic creators, which I'm very glad to be a part of, organizations that have actually produced and illustrated and edited their own comics, like, for example, the Women in Comics Collective by Regine L. Sawyer, where it's nothing but women of color that are doing their own thing. So there's great comics out there like Eating Vampires and The Rippers and Malice in Ovenland and Half-Centric. And I've been reading a lot of those independent comics because I do see myself reflected in those. I don't get a chance to see them on the bookshelves of every comic book store in the country, but at least I know that there are spaces that are finally created where I can see myself. Yeah. You just have to make a little bit more effort than, the privileged folks out there that get to see themselves.
And with that, I mean, is there anything, I know you mentioned that you're part of some groups. Is there anything else, we're pretty much going to wrap up. So is there anything else that you have going on that you want to share with us? I know you have your Black Girl Nerds website. Did you also have Black Girls Code? You started that? Were you affiliated?
Oh, no, that was started by Kimberly Bryant. Okay. I'm just a cheerleader for them.
Yeah, I saw that you would mention them, so it was like, I'm not sure if it was affiliated or not, but is there anything else that you have going on or coming up, or anything that you want to plug or promote? Tell people where to find you on social media if they don't already know.
Yeah, certainly. So blackgirlnerds.com is the website. We also have a podcast that is aired weekly. It usually drops around Monday or Sunday, depends on my schedule. But we're on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud, where you can find us there. And also, if you want to support us, which we're always looking for support, we have merchandise at the Black Girl Nerds store through TeePublic. So go to blackgirlnerds.com/t-shirts. And you can see all of our logos and images of women that look like us in the form of comic book characters and superheroines. And there's a meetup that's going to be happening on March 19th in Philadelphia that I will be a part of, called the Black Podcasters Meetup. So a lot of us podcasters of color will be out there to help support Ariel Johnson, who's the first Black woman to ever open up her own comic book store at Amalgam Coffee House. So check that out if you're in Philadelphia. I'll be there, and that's it for now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and thank you everybody that tuned in and saw this live. Sorry about the dog. We'll be back in March with new topic, new guests, and check out our tag on blastr.com, where we're posting original content and just giving you all sorts of perspective from the female fan point of view. So it's blastr.com and Fangirls, and you can find us at Blastr Fangirls on Twitter, and of course check out blastr.com because, But thank you so much, and Jamie, it was great talking to you. Thank you for spending this rainy Thursday night on a Google Hangout with me, and hopefully I get to talk to you again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Sure.